सभा प्रारंभ प्रार्थना दक्षिणास्य समारंभा शंकराचार्य मध्यमा अस्मदाचार्य पर्यंता स्मर्या गुरु परंपरा श्रुति स्मृति पुराणानाम आलयन करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शंकरं लोकशंकरं शंकरं शंकराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वंदे भगवन्तो पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेद विभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। परिज्ञानाश्रम श्री गुरु शंकर परिज्ञानाश्रम शंकर सद्गुरु केशव वामन कृष्ण पांडुरंग आनंद परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शंकर सद्गुरु गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। Praveen ma'am, may I request you to welcome the audience?
Thank you. So, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So this is welcome. I'm welcoming you to this another session of Mulaqat. And this session is with Roshni Nirodi Pachi from. Sorry, I'm calling Roshni Pachi as a Pachi. So that's the way we address. So Roshni, or maybe I now call you as Roshni. So Roshni is a versatile young personality who had got a brilliant academic career. Then she worked in IT industry, has been now working in foreign service. In between, she also kind of was involved in social work with working with nomadic tribes in 9 different countries. She knows various languages. So I would say Roshni is a perfect model for our youngsters in our community to follow her career in administrative services and more particularly in the foreign services. There are very few Amchi young generation people will find in foreign services. And it's my request to youngsters from our community to follow Roshni's career, and maybe they can perhaps learn something from her. So welcome, Roshni. Rajiv Ma'am will of course talk about the KSA CSN, but this was an effort which was started by him in 2018 and has become, I would say, quite a successful format to introduce personalities from our small community who have done exceedingly well in different parts of the professions or different parts of areas where they started their career and they've done brilliantly in their career. And they can become the role models. Best Rajiv Ma'am to talk more about it. And I wish Roshni a great success going forward. And of course, next. So thank you, Roshni. I'll not call you Pachi again. So thank you.
Thank you.
So over to you, Rajiv Ma'am.
Thanks a lot. CSN, the acronym stands for Chitrapur Saraswat Network. We started this with His Holiness Swamiji's blessings, and that is what powers our work. Our aim is to help all community or people from our community to do better in whatever they have chosen to do. And we will provide a platform for networking and interaction through which all of us help each other do better in whatever we have chosen to do. But having said that, our primary focus will be on encouraging and promoting entrepreneurship. The Mulaqats are one of the first things we started. And like Praveen Ma'am said, the objective is to showcase the achievements of very high achievers from our community And although we are a very small community, we are blessed that we have so many achievers in our community. And this is the 8th Mulaqat so far. And we are going to have many more of these. The objective is to inspire the youth, not just the youth, the high achievers, to inspire and have the right role models for all of us. We have also created a website of our own of KSA CSN, wherein we list all our objectives. And more importantly, we carry a database on their own. This, I would encourage each one of us, all the AMCHs, to visit this database and check for, that really, dispels the myth that AMCHs are not cut out for business. That's not true at all. We can be very successful entrepreneurs. saraswat.com/CSN. Do visit this. The other things that we are doing is we have formed WhatsApp groups and Telegram entrepreneurs and professionals. And we hold regular workshops for knowledge sharing. And the information about these knowledge sharing workshops is disseminated through all the social media that are available to us. We have also recently formed entrepreneurs who need help in specific areas. We will be sharing details. We'll be launching within a month or so is a search feature. This idea was, from Kishore Masurkar ma'am, a kind of yellow pages of every AMCHI in business. So I would encourage each one of you to visit our website and check out more about us. And very importantly, try and identify at least 3 entrepreneurs who are not on the database on the website and encourage them to list themselves on the database. So more and more of us know about who's an entrepreneur in our community. I would also request the audience to send a WhatsApp message to the KSA WhatsApp number so we can include them in the groups that we have formed for disseminating information. I'm going to announce the number now. It is 887957536. I repeat, 887957536. All of you all, please send a WhatsApp message to this number. So we add you to the well-known, nothing can beat the speed of WhatsApp and Telegram. So please do that. Now with this, I think.
Rajamam, you may need to add +91 as the country code.
Oh, yes. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes. Please add, those of you who are abroad, please add the country code, which is +91 before you put in the number. Thanks, Praveen ma'am. So I won't take much more time because today's focus is to take over the proceedings now. Kiran ma'am?
Yes, thank you, Rajiv. As always, a very supportive team here, and Kishore ma'am in the background. He has enabled this whole program and also provided support for the success. This is our third Mulaqat across the oceans. Both Praveen ma'am and Kishore ma'am had discussed this with the organization here for Saraswat, the Chitrapur Heritage Foundation. And I'm going to briefly talk about, it's also known as CHF. So talk briefly about CHF, and then we'll get into the interview. So firstly, good morning to the folks in the United States. Good afternoon in the UK, and good evening in India and Indonesia. As a matter of fact, it's now a little after 10 p.m. in Indonesia, and there we have Roshni. So I'll do my part to be quick and brief so that we can get on with the show. And so for everybody, wish you a very happy Ganesh Chaturthi. Hope you enjoyed your celebrations in India, and they're still occurring on the western side of the world. And today is also a day which is the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which was a very tragic day in the United States. And just about with 1 degree of separation, most of us Saraswats can find somebody or a friend of somebody that was involved and lost their lives. And in my case, it was a fortunate story. My colleague's wife would fly there every month to work for a week. She worked in a company in San Francisco, and then she'd fly to New York and work on one of the top 10 floors of building number 1. And she fell ill and didn't go that day on that flight. And so it was shocking. And at the same time, she's alive today because she was ill. Otherwise, the rest of the team that went there perished. So a sad day for us. And also, it was a changing point in how the globe viewed international terrorism and safety, airline safety. With that, I'll get on with CHF. I'm Kiran Munkur. I'm one of the founding members of Chitrapur Heritage Foundation. It was started by a group of about 6 of us back in 2005 at the request of our religious leader, Param Puja Sajjajat Swamiji. And our focus very much to be involved, to involve our community in the United States, actively to engage with Sri Chitrapur Mutt, and also to help and serve in the socio-economic causes around our mutts and our community. And so under the blessings of our Swamiji, CHF is a not-for-profit organization registered since 2005 in the United States, and actively engaged with our community, which is now about 600 households and 600 plus households. So the CHF objective is to engage with Sri Chitrapur Mutt, supporting its Mutt-related causes, as well as social causes, such as uplifting of the underprivileged around our mutts, and also in our community through the combination of financial support, education, and several other opportunities in the rural vicinities, as well as in our local communities. In fiscal 2020, CHF collected approximately $500,000, and we are only a smaller percentage. So to understand how complex this is, of the overall running expenses of our Mutt and wonderful work that it does, that has received national and international funding at this point in time, and of which we collect about $200,000 US dollars annually. We collected, which went towards what is called as Vantiga. Vantiga is for the operating expenses of our mutts. And the supports, all of this supports several rural schools. So in addition to our mutts, in the vicinity of our mutts, and also the organization known as Samvit Sudha. It's a cottage industry empowering women in rural areas, and wonderful projects done. So those of you who have not visited from outside India, I'd encourage you to go visit Shirali. You even get a free tour, and you get to see all of these activities. And you see the poor people, they've been touched so beautifully in their lives. They're so honest, and they're so sincere in carrying out their duties. It is very joyous to see that whole thing, the whole village of Shirali operating so beautifully. It's so neat and clean. And even when the rain strikes Shirali, it's torrential. You can walk, and the water is so clean, it cleanses your feet. That was a striking notice, some observation that I had. when I was there during the monsoons. And CHF has provided support in multiple different ways for our community and this organization, and such as Samvit Sudha, the acquisition of certain a site in Tirumala, where we were involved in helping Mutt. We also were involved in helping with provide the COVID food kits, which was a great project initiated in India by the Mutt. And this provided 1 month's non-perishable rations for hundreds of people affected in that area. And they were really in trouble, and the Mutt reached out, and we assisted as well. And we now have also involved students to help us in multiple ways. We have been doing that for a while. So I'd like to briefly mention that we have a project called Project LEAP, and Riya Bizur is leading this to provide tablets to children in Virar School for the handicapped, and which is a wonderful school, and they take such good care of handicapped children. If you've seen the videos, it's very touching. And also data packs to the rural children. So she's a student in her close to her final years in high school. And it's a wonderful project she's taken on, and you're all on the list. Please help her reach her goals. CHF is very grateful for the support offered by our community, and especially the volunteers and the donors. I'm especially grateful to our Swamiji for his blessings and the success that it has brought to all of us, connecting us together and for us to be able to achieve more. Having discussed about CHF, I will now talk about our chief guest. I'm very happy that we have with us U.S. Consulate General of Surabaya, Indonesia, Roshni Nirodi. And welcome, Roshni. And it's a pleasure and an honor to have you. And we are going to talk about how Roshni, a first-generation U.S. born citizen, how she went from managing between two very diverse cultures, the Indian culture on which she was perhaps brought up on, and a very different US culture. At the time when she was young, there were very few Indians, relatively. And so she had to bridge this vast gap. And she did that. Not only did she do that well, she grew something very unique. And she climbed through the ranks of US foreign services. Prior to her posting in Indonesia, where she is the US Consulate General, she was unit chief in Portugal, in Lisbon, Portugal. She was a deputy unit chief and based out of Tokyo in Japan. And she was the political officer of war-torn Iraq during a turbulent period there. And she was also the US in the US Embassy as a consulate officer in New Delhi. And she will be sharing her inspiring journey through the ranks in foreign service. And it is now 10:30 p.m. for Roshni in Surabaya, and she gets up at 4:30 a.m. no matter what. Incredible lady. And so with no further ado, I will have Roshni share a few words, and then we'll start the interview. Ahead,
Thank
Roshni.
you so much. Thank you, Karen Mom. Thank you, Praveen Mom, too, for the kind and very generous introductions. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today from all corners of the world. It's really a pleasure to be a part of this project and to be with you all. And I just want to say sincere thanks to the leadership and the organizers from KSA and CSN who made that possible today. So Praveen Kadle, Kishore Masurkar, Jairam Kambodkon, and Rajiv Kalyanpur, thank you so much for making this possible and for allowing me to be a tiny part of your very inspiring work. Thanks also to the talented technical team that's connecting us all right now, as I understand, on multiple platforms. I know that that's no easy feat. And Karen, thanks to you for really being such a trooper over these last few weeks and dealing with the 14-hour time difference to make the coordination for this event possible. Really appreciate all your time and effort. And it's been really fun getting to know you over the course of this process. So I'm really excited to be here and to chat with you, and look forward to hearing from our viewers as well if they have questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Roshni. And with that, we'll get going here. So we'll start this journey from when you were an infant in New Jersey. So please tell us where you grew up within New Jersey and with your family, and any moments of your childhood that you wish to share with us.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I, as you mentioned, grew up in New Jersey, and I think in a place that's probably familiar to maybe many people who are tuning in from all parts of the world. I was born in Edison, New Jersey, which now I think is kind of synonymous as a little India, or very much a hub of South Asian culture and many communities. But my parents emigrated there in the 1970s, and at the time that I was born, when I was young, it hadn't quite blossomed into that yet, and so that's where I still call home, even though I haven't lived there in quite some time.
Thank you. And so here's a lovely picture of you, Roshni, there in a beautiful pink frock, and there with her intellectual and mesmerizing eyes, and smiling and happy father bring her. And anything you can share about, and some pictures of your town, your hometown, and anything you can share about this moment in your life. I know.
Yeah, sure. I actually, this was probably pre very concretely formed memories, but I will say, one of the reasons that I feel like Edison is part of my story is that the name Edison obviously is named after Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, at least according to some. And so what you see in the upper right corner, that tower there, was actually across the street from the house that my parents were living in when I was born, which was part of Thomas Edison's laboratory. And so that's why my name is Roshni, right? It means light. And I do feel like, even though I left Edison and New Jersey a long time ago, it sort of has followed me through many other chapters of my life, and I feel kind of tied to the place, I think, because of that.
Yes, and that's a wonderful introduction, and also to your how you were named, and yes, the inventor of the light. And that was I'm very fortunate that your house was almost right in front of that monument and significant landmark. And now, can you share about the gap that existed at the time you were there, in the relatively very few Indians, between how you were brought up and in the community that you lived in, and the outside United States, a vastly different culture? And how did that make you feel? And what did that set you to think about how to bridge this gap, or what was your way forward? Any things you can share about?
Yeah, sure. Obviously I only had my singular experience growing up in Edison. And as I recall, I think by the time I'd reached middle school or high school, there had already been wave after wave of immigration from India and other parts of South Asia. And so I think I actually was fortunate enough to grow up probably in one of the most diverse parts of the United States. So growing up, I think before I reached adulthood, I went to India twice. And both those visits were obviously filled with visits to relatives and, playing with cousins and that sort of thing. But I didn't really grow up with a very well-formed image of or understanding of India. And, I think my experience growing up in the United States probably mirrors that of a lot of now adults of my generation, where we were kind of left to sort of glean bits and pieces of language and culture and carve out this identity that sort of straddled both worlds. And I think I was, have been tremendously fortunate in just about every aspect of my life, but very much so with respect to the parents and the family that I ended up with. And my parents have always been very encouraging of, following curiosities and that sort of thing. But I do think that, it wasn't, I think growing up in an environment and in a place that was full of immigrant communities that were split between one generation trying to figure out how to assimilate into American life, and then a younger generation trying to figure out their own identities as X-Americans. For me, I think I had to leave New Jersey and kind of follow a path for quite a while until I started to really reconcile how to bridge those two worlds for myself and kind of come up with a better formed idea of what my own identity was.
Thanks for sharing that. For many individuals, either we have a predominant base, and that's what we align up with. And for those of the individuals in our audience who've been in this situation can understand how challenging this can be. And when I moved here, it was in my early 20s. And for me, my base was the Indian base. And sure, this culture was different and I had to adapt it. I was young enough to adapt it. But I could see that individuals were born in this country with Indian parents. It was quite a difficult bridge. They went to school where the culture was totally different. Their friends, totally different. What was taught to be right for us was something else, very different in a different culture. So having to decide from a very early young age was a difficult situation. And Roshni not only went through that, I figured how to come out even stronger and better. Now, no. Thank you. So we'll move to your college years. Maybe you can tell us what subjects you ultimately specialized in, and what motivated you to choose that area of your specialty.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was listening to the introductory remarks today, it actually gave me a little bit of food for thought, because when I was growing up, I think I, like everybody else of my generation, this was pre-iPhone, pre-internet world. I think you look around you to start to understand what work could be or what careers are possible or potential opportunities or options for you. And for me, I didn't really, I never really found my footing in terms of knowing that I wanted to take a particular path. Even in college, I had so many things that I was interested in, but nothing that I was sure I wanted to jump into with great depth. And I think, if I had to come up with a description for my entire childhood and young adulthood, it would probably be this quality of kind of restlessness that I think very much characterized my academic life. I just never was that student who spent all night studying for an exam and felt driven in that way to really go very deeply into something. And so for me, because I was sort of wrestling with all these different curiosities and wasn't able to pin down something that I knew I wanted to pursue, which I think is probably a common situation for a lot of young people, I just did what came maybe a little bit more easily to me, which was study languages, foreign languages, and then use some of the extra time that I probably would have otherwise spent studying to pursue other sort of lines of inquiry and lines of interest for myself. So when I was in university, I studied Japanese and Spanish. I also took a lot of economics courses, and then kind of scattered my interest in probably half a dozen other directions. And the same was sort of true of graduate school. I studied economics, but not really as diligently as I probably should have, because I knew that the path I was supposed to take wasn't really within a sort of prescribed, regimented course of study. And I was still trying to figure out how to marry a lot of my interests into a career.
Got it. Thank you. So as you took charge of your independence as a youth, having achieved your bachelor's degree, there was a burning desire within to pursue certain other things that such as exploring the world. And you were awarded the prestigious Thomas J. Watson Award, which is, as I know, is very difficult to get. And so it was timely that it kind of fed into your desire to know the world better, and a unique part of the world. It took you to the tribal worlds of Mexico and Burma as two examples. Can you share with us the unique lifestyles you experienced and your learnings from these?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, that chapter of my life was probably close to 13 months spent living, working alongside nomadic communities in about 9 countries. Was really challenging, but also very magical in a lot of ways. And what drove me to do that, apart from the opportunity itself, was this desire to understand how groups of people who are living nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyles still, when the rest of the world has long settled down, how they view reality. So the sort of constructs that govern our realities, things like money and work and time, those don't exist in the same way in these sort of isolated communities. And I really wanted to understand how the world looked through the eyes of these people. So again, I'll just say this was still before the age of iPhones. And I think that travel in general just had a very different quality to it. It was before September 11th also. It was just it was a different time. And, you couldn't look up a place on Instagram or on Wikipedia or on the internet, Google image search it, and know what it was going to look like. You couldn't look up a tribe and figure out where they were. Everything had to be done in this very analog way where, I ended up in Mexico with a bicycle and needed to cycle across Mexico to figure out where these people were. So in Mexico, I spent about 3 months, and some of that time was in northwestern Mexico, an area called the Copper Canyon. And I was living with a tribe of people called the Tarahumara. They're a tribe of long distance runners. Actually, since this time, they've become somewhat famous due to a book that was written maybe 5 or 6 years after I was there. And the reason that they're famous is that they're amazing long distance runners. So the Copper Canyon is actually deeper than the Grand Canyon, for those who are familiar with the Grand Canyon of Southwest United States. And these Tarahumara, they over hundreds of years sort of developed this ability to run from the top to the bottom and back. And they have served as messengers. They've carried mail, they've carried supplies, they've carried other important materials back and forth between the villages at the bottom of the canyon and the villages at the top. And they're incredible people. They can run for 16, 18 hours at a time. Some of them now in this post-internet era have actually settled down, been recruited to do ultra marathons, and have run these 50-mile marathons wearing just sandals and one. I mean, really incredible people. It was really a tremendous opportunity to spend time with them. So that was actually the first chapter of this year-long experience, and it was really fantastic.
Right, that's wonderful, right? So you actually, this picture here, and it's very hot there too, right? It's in the 90s Fahrenheit, 40 plus degrees Celsius temperatures, and you did the same thing. You would run up and down the canyon, and the tough person that you are, and so it's very inspiring. That you wanted to not only just know about the tribe, but actually live that experience.
It was amazing. Yeah, I can't say I was able to run anywhere near as long as they were, but it was really nice to spend time with them and to be able to just participate a little bit.
Right. And so we have another example of you living off a boat for a duration of time in Burma. Can you share about that? The experience about that?
Sure. Yeah. This was actually something that I really wanted to do. There's a tribe of nomadic boat people. They're called Moken, or sort of sea gypsies, and they travel up and down the Murgwai archipelago, which stretches from Burma all the way around to Sri Lanka. And they spend about 90% of their lives on boats. They only go to land during the monsoon or when there's something going on that doesn't allow them to be on the water. And I had this, I was trying to figure out, actually, when I was in Mexico, I was spending a lot of time thinking about Burma and just wondering how on earth I could possibly get a chance to spend time with this group of people. And through a very, very random and fortuitous series of coincidences, I happened to connect with National Geographic. They were looking for someone who was interested in doing research out in Burma. And so I was able to go with a National Geographic crew out to this area called Lenpai Island. It's about 3 days offshore of the mainland Burma. So it's really far out in the middle of nowhere, really. But we spent about a month out there. I was actually living on a boat, much like the boat that you see on the right. That is one of the wooden Moken boats. It's completely handmade. It's everything is hand fused together. There are no, materials that we would traditionally think of in modern boat building techniques, just solid wood. And I was living with this family for about 3 weeks. And in the distance, you can see there's a much larger, more elaborate boat, sophisticated boat, and that is actually the National Geographic boat. So they were on that boat where they had showers and all kinds of modern conveniences, and they were filming me. So it was a very odd experience, definitely very, very trying in some ways, but also really wonderful. And this group of Moken, what's extraordinary about them is they're not particularly well suited to be living on the water, even though they live on the water. They're not good swimmers. They're somewhat afraid of water, but the older women in this community are tremendous divers. And that's how they find much of their food is the women go, they dive and find sea urchins and fish and spearfish and all kinds of things. And they can hold their breath for an incredibly long time. So I was doing a few projects with this group, including a solar oven project, also working with a few geneticists at Oxford University to do some some genetic research with this group. It was really a cool opportunity, and like nothing else I've ever experienced anywhere.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah, these are unique opportunities, and you've learned so much out of them. There's also tremendous commitment, the hardship, and you faced it as an individual alone with different, vastly different tribes. A great learning experience, something for us to, and for our younger generation particularly, to look at and try and engage themselves when opportunity permits. And now we'll talk about, so after this, you went on to get your master's degree from Cornell. And so for those outside of the United States, this is an Ivy League school, similar to the IITs, which are technology-based in India. Very, very difficult to get into, very demanding curriculum. And with all the rich experience that Roshni had gained through her real life experience, as well as her education, she got admitted there, completed her master's, and then you moved on initially into the Silicon Valley. And can you share with us what attracted you to the Silicon Valley, and also talk a little bit about your the companies you work for there?
Sure. Thanks. I think that, as you can see, having spent this time traveling around without a schedule and having complete freedom to do whatever I wanted overseas, it was a little bit difficult and challenging to go back into a pretty rigorous academic situation at Cornell. And so when I found myself interviewing for jobs, I was really interested in seeking out a sector, a lifestyle that might be a little bit more flexible. And at the time, Silicon Valley was very alluring, right? There was just a place of ideas. I mean, it still is, but at the time it was new. I feel like now it's a much more known quantity. At the time, there were so many booms going on there, and it really felt like a place where people could kind of create the lives, the careers, the jobs that they wanted. And that drew me in. So I wound up working for a company called Sun Microsystems, which is now Oracle. And I had a really pretty cool job. I was working as a location strategist, is what the job title was, but I was essentially working with a group of engineers. And at the time, I entered into Silicon Valley life right at the moment where the concept of offshoring work or outsourcing work was really hitting its peak. So because people realized that the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley is just so expensive, and the land especially there was so expensive, a lot of executives had made very somewhat rash decisions to fire large numbers of people and rehire larger numbers of people in places like Bangalore and places like Beijing, without really considering the long-term implications of doing that, or whether that was in the best interests of their companies or organizations. So my job there was actually to work with these engineers to design tools that forecasted the real costs of hiring individual software engineers and others in about 250 locations around the world, and to use a lot of that data to predict where the next Silicon Valleys around the world are really going to be. And it was a fantastic job, obviously very dynamic, but also I think it was really powerful to be able to dig into the data and then use it to debunk a lot of myths about the movement of work and offshoring and outsourcing, and to be able to kind of educate a lot of executives who maybe weren't making the most considered decisions at the time. it also was great for me because it allowed me to spend a lot of time in India, also in China, Latin America as well. So it was very dynamic work, and it actually kind of started to rekindle, I think, some of the sense of sort of wonder and possibility that I had when I was on the Watson and traveling around, and that I kind of lost when I went back into an academic environment.
Very good answers there. And so it was an interesting internationally focused job, and that's what attracted you. And it also gave you the flexibility for a period of time that you needed in your life. And so shortly after that, at some point, you decided that this cubicle-bound job, sure, you had your travel opportunities, but largely a cubicle-bound job was perhaps not in your best interest. And can you share with us what led you to take on foreign service with the United States of America?
Sure. Yeah, as you said, Sun was probably about as flexible as an employer could be at that time. And I think that company really was one of the pioneers of the work from any place, anytime type mentality. But I think after about 2 years there, after about 2 years in the Silicon Valley, I really started to look ahead in my life and realize that in the private sector, you're on a certain path. And the only way to deviate from that path is to seek out another job or to switch organizations. At least that was my image at the time. I think the possibilities are actually much more broad, but at the time it felt very constraining to me. And I couldn't really see a path forward for myself in the private sector. So I started doing a little bit of exploration and realized that the Foreign Service exam was being administered in San Diego, which is where I was living at the time. So I took it, and it worked out. And then the second part of the Foreign Service selection process was to take an oral exam. And I still can't quite explain how this all came together, but I had to fly to Washington, D.C. to take the second exam, the oral exam, which lasts a whole day and is kind of notoriously difficult. And I wasn't really taking the process very seriously. But I had picked up this book at a friend or a relative's place. I can't even remember where, but it was about interviewing at Microsoft, which at the time was known to have these very, very difficult interview questions and selection process. And so I read it because it was a really interesting book. I was reading it on the plane on the way to Washington, D.C. And when I got there to take this oral exam, the examiners were using all the same tricks from that book. So it was really difficult not to pass. The process has changed dramatically since I took it, and I'm sure they're not following that methodology anymore. But even though I probably was relatively ill prepared for actually knowing what foreign service life held in store, something brought me there, and it all worked out. So several months later, after passing through a medical and security clearance, I found myself sitting in a training class, and yeah, it was kind of almost sort of magical how the whole thing came together. But I suppose this is what happens in life sometimes, and you just have to go with it.
Yes, no, thanks for your candid response here. And in life, there are opportunities, and there is an element of luck. But those who are constantly in touch with what's going on, including voracious appetite for reading, do benefit from these opportunities when they come across. And that's a great example of how from this book you read, it led you into the success within the interview. And from there, it rose to your success. Thank you for sharing that with us. So now I'm going to ask you a question that may not be easy for you to answer, but the audience deserve to know. And so you were forewarned, being from an Asian Indian community, and where mostly professional, your parents coming in here, community, that to not take up a job, a foreign service job within India. Yet you chose consciously to do that. So can you share with us why you chose to do so? And then what was your experience? What were your experiences there? And then the learnings of it.
Sure. Yeah, I will say that, on the first day of training to become a US diplomat, you're placed in these training classes. In my case, it was with 87 other people. So there were 88 of us. And on the very first day, everybody gets a list of places. And these are assignments. So locations all over the world. These are places where there are US embassies or US consulates. And you have to turn in the list after a few days with all 88 places ranked from 1 to 88. And then you hope that you get your number 1 or number 2 choice. And it's quite overwhelming, when you see these lists, because there are locations all over the world. Some of them are not maybe, possible for you because you don't speak the language or there's no language training offered. But there's this really kind of intense moment where you have to reflect on the list and figure out where your number 1 and number 2 and number 3 places are going to be. And for me, as you mentioned, there's kind of this, I wouldn't call it conventional wisdom, but there's a piece of advice that gets offered often to diplomats who are from other backgrounds, or like, for example, Indian American. And the advice is to not go to places where you have family members, extended family members, or places where you look like the people who live there. And that's usually advice that's given before the first assignment, because the very first assignment that one does in the diplomatic service is as a consular officer. So you're doing visa interviews. And the thought is that, it's better to have a little bit of distance from the culture or the place that you're working with. And I didn't really understand where that advice was coming from. I thought it was coming from some very wise and experienced people, but when I saw the list and I saw that New Delhi was on there and that there was some Hindi language training offered, it seemed like a really opportune moment to go to India and actually really try to connect with the place and to kind of go bring things full circle and have the opportunity to live there as an American and understand a little bit more about, about my roots, even though obviously our family's not from New Delhi. But it wound up being a very powerful experience. So, India, as I think many of you know, it's a place with very high demand for visas of all types. And the experience of working as a visa officer is a really special one. It's very hard work because the demand is so high that you walk into this office and you have to raise kind of the blinds on a window. And every morning when you open those blinds, on the other side of that window, there are probably about 1,000 people, sometimes more, and there are more lined up outside. So the visa office was divided into sort of English language applicants and then Hindi language applicants. And it's a really stark contrast. When you open the window each day, the English part of the applicant line is filled with people who are going to study in the United States, people who are going on H-1Bs to go work for, Fortune 100 companies or to go over as doctors, lots of business travelers, of course. And then the Hindi line is more often than not filled with a lot of people who've traveled, by overnight train for 2 days to get there. A lot of them don't have shoes. A lot of them are farmers. And many of them are trying to go to the United States on a tourist visa to work or to reconnect with family who are already there and to live there. And it's really hard. It's really I was there in New Delhi for just under 2 years. I did 39,000 visas during those 2 years. And each one of those interviews is somebody's story. And for a lot of those people, that decision means a lot, and it's resting on your shoulders. So it's a lot of responsibility. And I think being Indian American doing that job it's a slightly different thing than maybe somebody who doesn't have a connection to India, because those people look at you differently. And you realize, coming from an immigrant background too, that there's really just a hair's breadth away, between you and that other person, whoever that person is. It's just a random, series of coincidences that brought me to one side of the window and those people to the other side. And I think I'm still, many, many years later, processing some of the stories that I heard during that assignment and trying to reconcile those experiences. But it was a very powerful time, and it felt like a really good way to spend 2 years, even though I haven't done consular work since.
Right, that's a wonderful life story you shared with us. On the one hand, you've got the educated that kind of are an easy entry, because you know that if they come into the United States and settle, they will contribute to the economy. And so safer to be able to grant them the visa. They were in a socially higher status. At the same time, there were the people who really needed the visa so that they could have a major improvement in their life, socioeconomic life. And unfortunately, the risks involved were higher there. So the very challenging part in your mind, because you had to make the right decision, and your judgment decided the future of their lives. And so it's very trying within. And so that's a wonderful, and it's a very difficult job for having taken that as first assignment. Thank you for sharing that experience with us. So now we'll go on to Iraq. In 2010, it was an unsettling time. President Obama wished to withdraw the troops, and you took up the assignment in Iraq. So it was a very challenging time. Why did you choose that point in time for this opportunity to work in Iraq? A lot of risk and danger involved, and you decided that that's where you wanted to go. And also share a little bit about what you can about this experience.
Sure. Yeah, actually, my second assignment after New Delhi was supposed to be Vancouver, Canada, which is very different from Iraq. But in truth, I think after my time in New Delhi, I really wanted to do something a little bit more arduous. I was kind of I was young and really wanted something that was a little bit more of a challenge. So I volunteered to go to Iraq and was scheduled to do a job in the political section there. Still ended up in the political section, but about a week before I left to go to Baghdad, there was a bombing in the Iraqi Foreign Ministry, right outside the Iraqi Foreign Ministry, and it destroyed a large chunk of the Iraqi Foreign Ministry. And several Iraqi diplomats died, including the person who would have been my counterpart on the Iraqi side. So when I got there, my job description essentially changed kind of overnight. And for the better part of a year, I ended up spending a lot of time at the foreign ministry. This picture actually here is with the Iraqi foreign minister at the time, Hoshiar Zabari, and we worked really closely together, just trying to rebuild Iraq's diplomatic corps. So a lot of the work was structured around trying to find medical assistance, trying to find training for new Iraqi diplomats, things of that nature, trying to help them rebuild. And then also a part of my portfolio dealt with human trafficking, which is also a big problem, was a big problem there. And so a lot of my work related to trying to work with NGOs to get victims of human trafficking out of the country and hopefully into better situations and better lives. So it was a really emotional year, a very, very powerful year for sure. And it was only 1 year. You know, those jobs in war zones are typically 12 months, but you work every day, you know, and then you get these chunks of vacation just to recharge. But I really feel like that 1 year was probably, it felt like 5 years in terms of growth.
Wow.
and experience. It was really great.
Yeah, I know. I heard about no break for 3 months or something. You work every day, which is very challenging. And these are not light 8-hour days. It could be very long days and nights. And so it's a very demanding job. And there you are, right? I've been told that the armor that you're wearing is something like 40 pounds. The helmet is about 20 pounds. And you look like, that's fine. I can deal with this. And there's danger outside. So there's a lot of challenge and risk. And you've taken it in stride, very commendable. And I think something that our younger generation can look up to, be inspired if they wish to take on such adventurous opportunities in their lives. Thank you. So, yeah, the next, I wanted to talk about your next opportunity, which was you were the personal strategic advisor to Carolyn Kennedy in Japan. Carolyn Kennedy, for those in the audience who don't know, she is the daughter of one of the most popular presidents, late presidents of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and also known as JFK, and who was assassinated back in the 60s. I was a little boy. I remember that sad moment for the United States, and also sad moment for India, because he was very popular. And so his daughter, based on his popularity, injected herself into politics. And Roshni had the challenge of working with her. So Roshni, can you share with us, this was demanding in certain ways. You are an intellectual, you dealt with very complex, you can deal with very complex situations, but this took you in a different direction than what you expected. Can you share with us your experiences there and your learnings?
Sure. Yeah. This definitely was, in some ways, I think probably my most challenging assignment. I spent a few years at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo working in the economic section, and then our ambassador changed. Ambassador Kennedy came into the role, and she was looking for somebody who could help her understand Japan, not the policies or politics of Japan, which is what most of the embassy was already doing, but she really wanted to get out of Tokyo, get out of the embassy, and really understand the culture, the people, and have the opportunity to meet and connect with people, to lend perspective to the policy discussions back in the capital. And I actually, again, this is one of those serendipitous moments where I ended up in an elevator with her. And we had a short conversation, and somehow that became the sort of the first step to me ending up in that job. And so I was in that job for about 3 years. It was a very, very demanding role, a lot of travel. So Japan has 47, they call them prefectures. They're sort of like states. And I think we traveled to about 42 of them together. And my job consisted of essentially designing experiences, so speeches and events. And she's very athletic, so a lot of sports diplomacy, type events that allowed her to connect with politicians, with audiences, with universities, others, to highlight some of the policy issues that we were dealing with in Tokyo, and also to make speeches and to understand culture. So it was, and then of course we had a lot of visits from Washington. So we had President Obama visit, Secretary of State at the time, who was John Kerry, a lot of other dignitaries, and those visits also proved to be incredibly demanding work in terms of doing the advanced work and also structuring the visits and the working with Washington to make them happen. So it was a lot of hours, a lot of weekends, holidays spent on the road, and for me it was I think a kind of a turning point in my career in a way. It was very glamorous work to the degree that it was very high profile, but it was also very stressful. And I think up until this time, I hadn't really thought very deeply about stress, but we had one particularly challenging trip. And when we came back to Tokyo, the official interpreter for Ambassador Kennedy suggested that we all go to this place called Akahigedo, it's called the Order of the Redbeards. It's a bunch of doctors who are extremely knowledgeable about Chinese medicine, Asian medicine. And so you go there and you lie on a table for about 90 minutes, and they do three things. They give you acupuncture, they give you shiatsu massage, and they put these hot vacuum sort of cups on you that do some suction on your body. And the whole point of this is to diagnose what's going on in your body. And I thought, for sure, I'm going to sail through this experience with no problem. And then they told me that that my liver was tired, that my stomach was tired, that my kidneys were tired. And I thought, how could that possibly be? And they told me that I'd been thinking too much, and that the stress from my job was actually really starting to take a toll on my organs. And I think this was, for me, the first time that I realized that, even though I was in this incredibly somewhat satisfying job, that it was harming me, and that I wasn't really being very present in my work, because my work demanded that I was always thinking about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and planning ahead and kind of living in the future. And I think it was my first brush with realizing that I needed to make some changes.
Yes, this is very interesting. It's kind of like the parallels with yoga, in that there is a healthy mind, but there's also an association of healthy body. Otherwise, if we are focused, as you mentioned, very mentally focused, that and also thinking about the future, so there's a significant amount of stress that somehow it does damage our body. And my brief learnings about yoga taught me the same thing. So it's interesting to see that parallel in the Japanese culture. And so here is a picture of a different occurrence, points in time in Japan. Could you, I think the one on the left, I can recognize Carolyn Kennedy there with you. Maybe you can share with the audience about these three experiences with Japan at different points.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. The one on the left, that is in fact Ambassador Kennedy in the back, and then her interpreter Yumiko was also there. So this is actually during one of our many excursions. This one was a little bit more light than normal, but we are at the rice farm of the Prime Minister of Japan at the time, Shinzo Abe, his wife's family's rice farm. And we were invited there to do a traditional rice planting ceremony, which involved a lot of media and that sort of thing. And this was after it was over. They actually let us drive the machine that they used to plant rice. We had done it by hand, but then of course they had to go back over with a machine and straighten out all of the rice plants that we had misplanted. So they let us actually drive the machine, which was really fun. And then the middle, I think, is just from a work event in Tokyo, which was on a boat, as I recall. But there's a season in the year where there are a lot of meetings and other events held on these boats that go along the major river in Tokyo. And then summer is fireworks season, so there are usually fireworks at night. It's a really very nice setting to work in, for sure. And then on the right, that picture is actually from an airbase in northern Japan, and I'm pretty sure my hand is resting on a missile. But that was one of our usual work visits. I think this one was to go see the troops and to make some speeches out in northern Japan. So yeah, really, it was, like, as I said, a really amazing 3 years. For me, it was particularly satisfying because I'd studied Japanese for so long, and it was a great opportunity to be able to really use it every day. But yes, also very, very, very physically draining and challenging work as well.
Right. So three different experiences there in Japan, and with Carolyn Kennedy, business meeting on a boat, and then at an Air Force, U.S. Air Force base, and a very diverse set of activities, and a very challenging time you had there in Japan. Thanks for sharing that with us. So now we will talk about, through all of this, right? You had a very hectic lifestyle, and tell us about your romantic side. How did you meet your husband? How did the two of you get to know each other? And his, I've read quite a bit about him on the website. He's so busy with being a music composer. Do share what you can about his wonderful life as well. And go ahead. I'll share some pictures also of you and your husband in the meantime.
Thank you. When I was in Japan, actually, I and a few friends, we realized that we hadn't really planned a vacation. And there's 1 week that everybody in Japan has a break for. It's called Golden Week. And because the Japanese plan so far ahead, it's really hard to get plane tickets to go anywhere. So we were looking online to see if we could get reasonably priced plane tickets. And the only place that we could find plane tickets to from Tokyo was Iceland. And so we thought, okay, let's do it. Let's go to Iceland and take a road trip. And so we went to Iceland, and I had rented a car. We were going to go on a long road trip. And our first night there, we were terribly jet lagged. So it was the middle of the night, but we decided we would just kind of cruise around the city and go to whatever was open. And I wound up meeting this Danish fellow named Christer. He later became my husband a long time later. We only spoke for about 10 minutes, but we did keep in touch. And it turned out we had a ton of things in common, which we didn't realize until after I was back in Japan and we were, texting and that sort of thing. But we had read a lot of the same books and just had wildly different backgrounds, wildly different childhoods and upbringings, but strangely seemed to be interested in a lot of the same things, and kind of had a very easy way of communicating with each other. So we decided to meet up again. And I was back in the United States at this time. We met up again in Iceland. It was fantastic. And then we took a road trip across the United States. And my assignment after Japan, after this time in the US, was in Portugal. So that made it a little easier for us to meet up. And then we ended up getting engaged. So that's that was the day that the photo on the left was taken. This is in Portugal. And Christer is a really accomplished tech a software engineer, and has started multiple companies, tech companies, green tech companies, but he's always really loved music. And because of my lifestyle, his interests sort of started to pivot away from tech and more towards music, because it was something that, he could do from anywhere. And he realized that maybe the time was ripe to put tech on the back burner for a while and get more heavily into virtual orchestration. And he's been composing music for a little while now, for film and for advertisements. And now that we're in Indonesia, he's found quite a bit of success here. His sort of tag name is his last name is Ostergaard, so his tag name is Osterdamus. And he's having a great time here, composing even some Indonesian style music. So it's been fun. We had to have 2 weddings because of logistics and having family in different places. So we had our first wedding in Copenhagen, Denmark, and then a second one in just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, where I have quite a few relatives. So that photo on the right was taken during that time in the Valley of Fire, which is a park just outside of Las Vegas. It was really great.
Wonderful pictures here showing so much love between the 2 of you and respect, and very inspiring. I think I also see one of those pictures there in your office behind you on your left.
Yeah, that's actually cartoonified, but it's from a memory of ours in Iceland, actually. So yeah, kind of our own journey has been quite international.
Oh, that's right. That's a different picture, right? Yeah, but yes. So that's such a wonderful experience, and you have a wonderful relationship going on. So outside of your career, you have the balance. Which is so important, as several successful people have shared, and they have an equally well-balanced life outside of their career, and they make it a point to invest in that. So thanks for sharing those moments with us. Now, about Lisbon, Portugal, you did mention it, and you were the political unit chief. So the first time you were now in a significant role. And what were some of the challenges here in Portugal and the key decisions that you may have made in this role?
Yeah, Portugal is it's really unique, interesting country. And I know in the last couple of years, pre-COVID, it had really hit a lot of people's radar screens because it is a really beautiful place and a wonderful place to travel to. But when I started my work there in 2016, it hadn't quite blossomed into the travel hub that it became. It's got a very interesting set of issues that are very unique for that part of Southern Europe. Obviously, I think the major issue in much of Europe is Russia related, but Portugal is so far away geographically from Russia that problem set is not a major one over there. Rather, it's a very unique set of issues that we were handling. One of them, which I actually didn't really know about until I took up the assignment, relates to a group of islands that's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called the Azores, and they are part of Portugal, but they have their own president and they have kind of their own regional government. But the United States has operated a military base there since World War II. And following World War II was actually a major base because aircraft at that time had to stop somewhere in the Atlantic to refuel if they were going to Africa or to the Middle East. And that base called Lajes, it was a major site, a refueling site. So it was actually very heavily staffed. There was a lot going on there. But, in the intervening years between World War II and now, aircraft have modernized a great deal. They don't need to stop. Now they have the capacity to keep going and they can fly across the Atlantic, no problem, and much further afield. So the decision was made actually just a few years before I started my assignment to streamline the base, to reduce the number of people working there. And that caused a huge rift in the US-Portugal relationship. Obviously that base had been there for decades and had become a major economic fountain for the entire, that entire group of islands, and culturally too. The people working at that base, the community there, their lives were so interwoven with the economic, life and potential that was growing out of that base. So to reduce the number of people working there, to streamline the functions there, really had a huge economic impact on the Azores. And there's a lot of political interest in that part of the world because there are a lot of Azorean communities in the United States and a lot of Azorean politicians in the United States, including many Congress members. So this was a much bigger decision than just, reducing staff there, and it had implications on the U.S.-Portugal relationship for years to come. So a lot of my job was managing that, the communications, the political fallout, and smoothing relations with the Portuguese government in the wake of those decisions out there.
Thank you. Right. So a new set of challenges, and although distance from Russia, yes, so it was very unique in its own way, and a great opportunity. And you did very well there, and that led to you being appointed to ultimately into Indonesia. But a little before that, I wanted to just ask you about, you're involved in multiple activities in addition to your career. So I have some pictures from your personal life outside of work, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. So here is the reunion in Las Vegas, an activity you enjoy in Portugal, in Lisbon, and some of the outdoor activities you've taken on. Do share with us, what these experiences were like. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, these were, I guess, 3 sort of snapshots from around that time. It's as I think a lot of your viewers probably also have experienced. It's hard to make time to bring together family, and now especially so because of COVID. But this was way before COVID, and it was still difficult when there are people who are occupied with their work, occupied with family, and also sprinkled across the world. So our family had the opportunity to gather some years ago in Las Vegas, which is where I happen to have a lot of relatives. And it was really fantastic to be able to spend time together. I think we were together for a week, and it was really, really great bonding experience. Also, so the middle photo is just a chance occurrence. Many years ago, I took accordion lessons for a while. It's a very challenging instrument, and it's not a very practical instrument because it's hard to travel with. It's heavy. It doesn't fit in the overhead compartment of a plane, and they're quite fragile. But when I was in Lisbon, I had the opportunity to meet up with these musicians in a vineyard and do a little bit of playing, which was really fun. And then also had the chance to take sort of a bucket list trip for me with a number of friends. We entered sort of a lottery, and we got the opportunity to raft the Colorado River, which is at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. That was a 7-day trip, 8-day trip. And it was magical, just really amazing beauty down there, and also no technology. So it was great. There was no work, no phone calls, nothing, no internet. It was great. So this is one photo from that trip, I think, just doing a little bit of hiking after a day of rafting. It was really, really fun experience.
Right. All these are unique experiences, and yes, it's always fun to meet up with the extended family. It's hard to do, and it's wonderful that you were able to soak in with the relatives. And yes, it's like anything that's got a big challenge, you want to take that and master it. And the accordion is one of those instruments, very difficult to play, and you enjoyed playing it while you were in Lisbon. You learned a new instrument, and you also went on to enjoy outside of your work. Yeah, Colorado River. Yeah, there's a long waiting list, and it has gone as long as 8 years. Sometimes I think it's much shorter now, but to just to be able to raft in the river because of how popular it is. But it's extremely demanding for the audience. This is a river with significant currents. It's very harsh in the outdoors. You can have temperatures go up to 45 degrees Celsius in 110 to 120 degrees. And so it's not an easy ride. It's very difficult, very challenging. You have to plan months in advance. And, you'll be very seasoned to be able to take on this adventure. And all part of your ongoing activities, Roshni. So very inspiring. And so after this, you moved in as the U.S. Consulate General for Surabaya, Indonesia. And so, can you share with us how you were appointed this, and what were your initial reactions, and when did you move there, and maybe a little bit about the job?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, Surabaya, it wasn't a place that I'd really known too much about, but I'd always had my eye on Indonesia and on the opportunity to serve at a consulate rather than a big embassy. I think after working in New Delhi, Iraq, Tokyo, these huge embassies, I was just interested in going to a smaller place where we get to do more of the work that actually affects people instead of working strictly with policy, which is what often happens at larger embassies, where you're dealing strictly with the host government and trying to iron out big bureaucratic problems. So the Surabaya opportunity was really fantastic, and this job is very unique. So Surabaya is in eastern Indonesia. It's on the same island as Jakarta, for those who are familiar with the capital, Jakarta, but it's on the opposite side of the island of Java. Indonesia has 17,000 islands, and Surabaya's district covers eastern Indonesia. So we cover 12 provinces, thousands of islands, about 80 million people in our district. And my job here is as the consul for political and economic affairs. So my team, we have the privilege of being able to really raise the profile of Eastern Indonesia for US industry, and also to cover the full range of political, economic, and commercial affairs and issues for the US government here. So it's really great. It's been fascinating. COVID has really hit Indonesia hard, and that's been hard for everybody here, including the consulate community. But despite that, despite the challenges that has posed to our work, it's still been really amazing opportunity to get to know and work with Indonesians across these 12 provinces, and to be a part of diplomatic work that touches such a diverse and rich culture.
Wonderful. Right. It's a it's a huge town, very busy. And so there is a complexity. Very seasoned individuals are brought in to lead from the US as Consulate General. So you have a very demanding job here in terms of the hours and having to take care of different situations. If you're able to, can you share about this hotline that is provided to leaders directly with Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, sure. A big part of what we do in political and economic affairs is, excuse me, is because we're really the sort of front line for the U.S. government here. We're really the only ones who are watching what's happening here in Eastern Indonesia. We have the ability to communicate directly with the White House, with the State Department, with other government agencies in Washington, D.C. And a lot of what we do is actually to write. We write them. And in the old days, pre-internet, diplomats spent a lot of time writing telegrams. That was what they did. And now that we have the internet, we still write telegrams. It's just that they're much more efficient and they go through slightly more sophisticated means. But a lot of what we do is actually, in talking to people, in meeting with people now, a lot of that is done virtually, but in being able to gain insight into this unique part of the world, which is kind of a lesser known part of the world for the United States. Obviously, the US is very far away from Indonesia, and this is the first place that I've ever lived where, a lot of people in the US government whose job it is to handle foreign policy or foreign affairs, they don't really know that much about this part of the world. This is a part of the world where Australia is kind of the biggest player in town. So it's fascinating to be able to bring that knowledge to policymakers and decision makers in Washington. And I will say, Eastern Indonesia is quite remote. It's a lot of islands, but there's a lot going on here. This is the part of the world that produces the most nickel in the world, that mines the most nickel in the world, which sounds like kind of a piece of trivia that might not resonate with a lot of people, but nickel is the key ingredient in electric vehicle batteries. It's going to be one of the most important commodities in the world for years to come, decades to come. And this is something that I think, only in the last couple of years, people have started to really wake up to just how important this is, and this part of the world is going to be driving all of that activity. So there are a lot of little things that Eastern Indonesia is known for that contribute greatly to shaping the direction of the world. And it's our job to bring that knowledge and analysis to Washington.
Right. So, yes, you alerted us, most of the focus is on Jakarta, but it's such a huge, that island is such a big island of Indonesia that Surabaya is at the other tip, totally different time zone. And then, right, in the early days, post-World War, all of Indonesia was known mainly for tin mining. And because cans were used for transporting materials, all sorts, including food. And tinning these cans was so important that's how it started. And from there now into the technology for greener environments with the battery and electrical technology that they're on the forefront for paving the way. And kind of the new version of the Middle East, what the Middle East has been for fossil fuel. So that keeps you really busy because, yes, there's a lot of trade and mining associated with Australia and perhaps with China as well. So thanks for bringing that awareness in us. And with the, they say that, there are three miracles in life. The first one is falling in love and getting married, which you experienced. The second one, they say, is the birth of a child. And we'll get to talk about that, of course. And the third one for you is when the child leaves the house. Okay, that's the third miracle. And although you do not want them to leave your house. And so let's talk about this miracle in your life. And tell us what keeps you going with your son and some of the things you share with him. You've got such a diverse, busy life, both in your career, your extracurricular activities, and then also with your son. Share with us some of the highlights with this wonderful guy.
Sure. Yeah, he really is a wonderful little guy. He's about to turn 3 in a few days. And, even though he's so young, I will say that, with all of the constant moving around and the travel that I've been privileged to do, there was a point in time, a few years ago, I would say, where I kind of hit a wall a little bit. And just, I think travel started to lose its its luster for me a little bit. I'd done so much of it that I think I stopped really appreciating it. Of course, now I appreciate it because of COVID. I think we all do, but it's the one thing that none of us can really do very much. But I realized, when he was born, and also I think after getting married too, that travel, which has been this one kind of key ingredient that has followed me everywhere I've gone in my life, that I started to think about it differently, and now, one of the joys of parenthood, I think for me and also for Krister, has been just getting to experience all of these things, simple things and exotic things, through his eyes, right? I mean, it's this completely new experience, and that for us has been wonderful. And it's also been really, he was born in Portugal, but he was so young then that he didn't really, I think, process that. But since moving to Indonesia, it's been really wonderful to see how he has taken to so many aspects of local life. And actually, in this photo, I realized he's wearing a batik apron, I think, to do some arts and crafts or something. But he's gotten really into the local wildlife. We have geckos and owls and all sorts of other birds and things in the yard that he loves to watch, and speaks a little bit of Bahasa Indonesia. And, there's a lot of, it's just really wonderful to see how he's interpreting and processing this experience.
He is getting to be multilingual, like both parents. So that's wonderful. It's so nice, that age of innocence and incredible curiosity, and so much parents learn through that experience. It's a delightful experience, and thanks for sharing that with us. I have one other question, and that is associated with outside of your activities, right? You have a very stressful and demanding job. You handle it so gracefully. You balance that with your family life and your extracurricular activities. But there are times where you have felt you focus too much on the future, or you're worrying too much about the past. And what is an activity that has drawn you into enjoying the present? Sure, this little guy here, he draws you into the present. And that's one aspect. And there's an activity also that you're involved with deeply. There's so many videos with you. And can you share a little bit about how you try and live in the focus and live in the present, and also enjoy that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thank you for that. It is a constant struggle, I think, especially because in my job, there is a lot of focus on planning and strategy and, looking to the future and trying to figure out how to maneuver and shape things in order to bring about a desired outcome. But for me, I'll just say that, yeah, there's definitely been a very intentional effort to try and constantly calibrate that balance between doing one's job well, but also staying as present as possible to really appreciate the days as they go. And one of my discoveries since the pandemic, actually quite recently, has been jumping rope, which sounds so silly, and I know it's usually a kid's activity, but it's been so powerful for me. It's so much fun, first of all, and it's great exercise, but it really, really does require a lot of focus. And it requires you to kind of marry, your full effort and focus, and to sort of meet that mind-body connection in order to get the rope to do what you want it to do. I know jump rope happens to be very popular in Indonesia as well. So it's been a really fun way to connect with coworkers and friends and that kind of thing as well. But yeah, that has been my most recent passion and curiosity. And it's definitely helped with kind of staying centered and grounded in the moment.
Right. Yeah, I remember that from Rocky, where Rocky does the jump rope in the movies, and several athletes became very popular out of that movie, and even the Olympic champions using the jump rope for exercise and also for almost doing it in a way that it's euphoric and drawing you into the present. There's so much focus, mind-body interaction in that. Right. It has been a wonderful experience, this journey, getting to know about you, how, my interactions, all of my interactions, no matter you were moving from one house to another, you were taking care of a 5-year-old and managing your work, and you, for every commitment you made with me, you were right on time, getting everything done, and engaging with me so gracefully and being patient with me. You think 10 steps ahead, and I had to do my best to try and keep up with you. It's been a wonderful experience, I think, for all of us here, getting to know you. We've received several questions, and before we get into the question and answer session, I'd like to know that if it's okay with you, then you could share your email address for our youngsters who may be curious to want a tip or two. Certainly, for the audience, Roshni is a very busy lady, so she might be able to answer a question from each one of you if there's a few questions through email, and we'll put that later on. We'll share it so you can connect with her. Especially, we encourage the younger children to the youth rather to be able to young adults to connect with our high achieving leaders. So now we'll get into the question and answer session, and we have had a very engaged audience, and so here are some of the questions. Right. So what inspired you to go around the world all by yourself? And at a very early age, what were some of these defining moments that where you were seated in your thinking that you really need to understand the world at large and not be just confined to the environment that you grew up in?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think this actually goes back to growing up in a place like Edison, New Jersey, where a lot of my friends when I was in school were children of immigrants. And there were a lot of, clearly a lot of, communities from other parts of the world, not just India, but, we had a lot of Italian and Korean and Latin American communities as well in the Edison area. And I think just having gotten a taste of those cultures growing up, and also growing up so close to New York City, from a very early age, there was this feeling like, wow, there's so much more in the world. There's so much more out there that for me, it really did result in a very deep restlessness from a young age. I think also, my parents are incredibly, curious people, always inspired that sort of curiosity. My father read a lot, read National Geographic actually as when we were kids. And so that those other cultures, those other influences were always around me, but they always felt like they were outside. There were things that were out there that I wanted to know more about. And the only way to know more about them at that time was to go out there and find them, because as I said, I grew up, before the internet. And so you had to do it yourself. Everything was more of a sort of go out there and seek the knowledge kind of model.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so the next question here is from one of our young adults. Is this more of a clarification question, I guess? But Mihika Gokarn, and she's a very inquisitive young adult, I know. So, did you work in the political economic cone of foreign services? Can you share how that specific area piqued your interest?
Sure. Yeah, great question. I am actually an economic officer. I'm in the economic cone of the Foreign Service. There are, for those who are not familiar with the Foreign Service, there are several cones, which are sort of specializations. And when you enter the Foreign Service, you have to declare one of those specializations. So there's a political, an economic, management, and consular, and public affairs or public diplomacy. So those are the different streams. And I've very happily been an economic officer for my career. But I've also done a lot of political work, as we've discussed. And I think what attracted me to the economic area specifically is that I love how concrete the issues are. I think, doing economic work, being a good economic officer requires a lot of different skills and challenging skills that require mastery over a long time. So it requires being able to write well, being able to analyze complex topics and developments and trends, but it also involves a lot of relationship building and relationship related work, contact building, being able to talk to people, who range from farmers and fishermen to professors and government officials, in order to understand what's really behind the economic numbers and trends in a country, what's really moving a place forward, and where are the opportunities for U.S. business in a particular location around the world. So that's what attracted me, and I just love the big abstract questions, but also that they boil down to very concrete numbers and things that are easy to wrap one's head around.
Thank you. And the next question, you went through some challenging times living with tribes and experiencing their day-to-day lives. Were there any hostilities from the tribals based on your experience?
Actually, great question. I did actually have one rough patch during that year. I should also note there were several tribes that I really wanted to spend time with, that I really wanted to learn about, but that I never found. Because they're moving around all the time, and I never moved around in quite the right location to find them. So that was also a big challenge that year. But yeah, I actually the part of my Watson Fellowship journey that I thought was going to be the easiest wound up being the hardest, and that was in Northern Ireland. I was living with, believe it or not, there is actually a semi-nomadic group of people. They're called the Irish Travelers, and they're in Ireland, Northern Ireland as well. And they're sort of the indigenous people of Ireland. They look, very similar to just about anybody else in Ireland, but they travel almost constantly in these horse caravans. They speak a different language. They have a different religion. And they're very interesting people, but their community has a lot of problems, a lot of issues, and I found it to be very difficult living and working with them for a lot of reasons, but in part because their culture is very traditional. It's very patriarchal. There's a lot of domestic violence, a lot of alcohol and drug abuse in those communities. And some of the NGOs that I was working with were working specifically on those issues. So I anticipated some of that, but I didn't really know in practice just how hard it would be to work with, especially the youth in those communities who were kind of bearing the brunt of some of those situations. So it was hard. I ultimately had to cut my time short there, just out of a little bit of a fear of safety. And I ended up going back to Asia after that. Yep.
Thank you. The next question. By chance, were you one of the children where the parents desired that you went into engineering or medicine? And there is quite a trend here. I know there's a little bit of stereotyping here of Asian Indian parents and the expectations of children born in the United States. But I think that's a valid question. If that was the case, how did you manage to reason with your parents to take on something totally different?
A great question. Honestly, I think I was kind of a lost cause. I think they knew pretty early on I was pretty much a lost cause in terms of engineering or medicine. I just didn't have that orientation. I think academically I wasn't gifted in those particular areas, and didn't have the curiosity or the interest. And to their credit, my parents never pushed that on me. But I think they were just wise enough to know that it was a lost cause. But something that that came up in the introductory remarks that I wanted to go back to was I love the network that you all are building through your efforts, because I think it's so important. And growing up in a family where, so my father, my parents are retired now, but my father was an engineer. My mother worked in the sciences and worked in a laboratory. So that was very much the template of, career possibilities the palette of career possibilities that I grew up with was very much in line with what your what that viewer is asking. I mean, a lot of my Indian American friends very much were pushed in those directions. A lot of my own family members are engineers or in the medical sciences. And I was always curious about entrepreneurship, but it didn't feel like a real possibility for me growing up, because I had no template. I had no sort of blueprint to understand what that looked like. And I think now there's so many more tools at our disposal to understand entrepreneurship, to network, to form a community of teachers and mentors and coaches who can kind of help us navigate those waters. But for me, I had one uncle who is a tremendously successful entrepreneur, but he didn't really get started until I was pretty far along in my youth. And I always had this curiosity. I think I still do, to be honest, but I'm still getting the courage to cross over into that world. So I encourage you to really explore your curiosities, whatever they are.
Wonderful advice for our younger generation. Thank you. And was there any role model that you looked up to when you were in your college or earlier on in your life?
Oh, so many. Yeah, so many. And I think, one of the biggest gifts in my life really has been just to have such great teachers, right? In terms of family, but also professors and some of my first, bosses too, in first jobs that I've had. And I think from each of them, I sort of gleaned little bits of wisdom here and there that ultimately led me to where I am now, and will continue to lead me to wherever I end up going. I never, when I was a kid, I didn't know what the Foreign Service was. I didn't know what diplomacy was, or that it would be a good fit for me. But I think that somehow, when you really listen to people that you trust and admire, their cumulative wisdom kind of guides you to a place where you find that path that's right for you, or you create it.
Right. Wonderful. Yes. Thank you. And there's a question sort of aligned with along the same lines here. And this is from Sanjay Nirodi. I don't know if you know him. And it's a clarification question. What is the essential criteria for participation in U.S. public service?
It's actually, there's lots of forms of U.S. public service. For the U.S. Foreign Service specifically, I'd really recommend for anybody who's a U.S. citizen who's considering it, interested in it, to check out the careers at state.gov website. If you just look up foreign service careers, U.S. foreign service careers in Google search, it'll pop up, and it's got all the information there. It's an interesting process to go through. It's a very you don't need. There are very few barriers to entry if you're a U.S. citizen. I don't even think you need a bachelor's degree. At least you didn't at the time that I joined. So what I love about this career is that it pulls people from all different age groups, all different academic backgrounds. In my entry class, there were 23-year-olds who had just graduated from college, and there were 50-year-olds who had already had entire careers as executives, as Army colonels. Just such a broad spectrum of people, and that's actually really reflective of the U.S. itself. And I think there's really been a move to recruit a very diverse diplomatic corps, and it's starting to show. And I think it's really for the betterment of foreign policy in general. So definitely encourage you to check out the website to get the specifics on the process.
Thank you. It's very helpful. Right. And through all your experiences, very diverse set of experiences in your professional life in U.S. Service, foreign service, was there anyone that was kind of more pushing you more on the outer edge? And which one was that? And which was, out of all of those, which was the most delighting in terms of not the country itself, but any kind of episodes in your experience?
Sure. I think in some ways it's, every assignment's been so different. They've all had their delights for sure, and their hard moments. I think that, excuse me, I think that, the Iraq experience stands out as one that kind of hit both marks. On the one hand, it really did push me to a lot of limits. It was very, very challenging. Not just in terms of being in a war zone, but just the nature of the work was very emotionally wrought. But at the same time, I think that was also what made it so satisfying, because in this place that was so broken at that time, I think, what was really satisfying is that even in the span of a year, you could have an idea, and if you could get the idea to work, if you could find the funding and get the right pieces in place, you could actually bring that idea to fruition and see the direct impact that it had on real people's lives. And I think, with diplomacy, because we deal so often with policy and these policy problems, it doesn't feel real, right? It can feel very abstract. It's a lot of paper and a lot of rules and a lot of regulations and meetings and discussions, but we often don't see the impact that it has on actual people, because sometimes that impact is delayed by several years, or it doesn't happen until after we leave the country and go somewhere else. And I think what was so gratifying about the Iraq experience was that there were so many problems and so many things that needed to be fixed, that if you could just fix one thing, you could see the ripple effects of that to affect actual daily life for people, which was very satisfying.
Wonderful answer. Thank you. So the next question, it's more, one of our well-wishers. We hope that sometime in the future, a Chitrapur Saraswat becomes the U.S. ambassador to India. Amazing. And we hope you will be that first.
Wow, thank you so much. That's such a kind comment.
I think we all share that sentiment. You've been so successful so early on in your career. It's been a very challenging career, and that we hope that you can have that, you can be a leader in that position.
Thank you so much.
Right. The next question: in what ways does the Foreign Services in our State Department support you in gaining better language competencies and cultural assimilation?
Yeah, thank you for that question. This actually has been one of the joys of this career. I think, it's so rare as adults that we have the opportunity to continue learning and to continue gaining new skills without actively seeking them out. And one of the great things about the Foreign Service is the language training that we receive. So in Virginia, Northern Virginia, there's a place called the Foreign Service Institute. And it looks a little bit like a university campus, but it's there to provide training for diplomats and for some military, but mostly for diplomats. There are about 200 languages taught there. Everything from Spanish and French to some of the most obscure languages in the world that have a very specific purpose in a particular region of the world. And we don't always get language training. It really depends on the job, but a lot of political and economic officers can't do their jobs well unless they speak the language fairly competently. In some places, they need to be almost fluent in order to do the work. So when we enter the Foreign Service, we take a standardized exam, standardized test. That's kind of like, for those who are familiar with the SAT, it's called, this one's called the MLAT, and it's similarly structured, but it measures one's ability to learn hard languages. And depending on your score on that test, you may get sent to a particular part of the world, or you may be encouraged to pursue harder languages. In my career, I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to study a number of difficult languages. And we take language courses depending on our existing ability. Usually we get sort of plussed up to a proficient or a fluent level. Or if we're starting from zero, then we might have to take a deep immersion course. So I didn't speak any Bahasa Indonesia before I took this assignment, but it's a relatively easy language. And so I took 6-7 months of study at the Foreign Service Institute, and now use it almost every day in my job. It's a fantastic language, and it actually has some interesting links to Sanskrit and to Hindi. So it's a cool connection after having lived in India.
Yeah, you make it look so easy because of how good you are learning a new language, and or also assimilating with a new culture. My limited experiences have been very challenging. So it's very impressive to see how quickly you can learn a new language. Six months in, hey, you're there. And that's inspirational. And so here's another question. Who do you consider your motivators and mentors moving forward in your journey, in your career journey?
There are actually too many to name, to be honest. I feel like I find mentors and motivators in every sphere of my life. Certainly a lot of my own family, including my husband, is a tremendous motivator and source of inspiration for me. But in the Foreign Service, I'm fortunate to have a lot of mentors who are ambassadors, and who have kind of really carved their own path through this world of diplomacy, but who manage their teams and manage missions, entire missions, just with such grace, and who've really been able to bring out the best in their people, which is a goal for me when as a manager of people, to be able to really tap into some of the tremendous talent that we have, not just among American diplomats, but also among the local staffs that we work with at every embassy and consulate. It's been a real privilege to work with such smart and caring and service-oriented people. And I think, the real strength of the diplomatic corps, it really rests in just the caliber of the people that we are able to work with here.
Wonderful. Right. It's good to know that there's a large support organization that you can look up to and draw inspiration from, and multiple leaders. Right. The last question I have is about the recent rash of independent party hacks, where these organizations. They're not aligned with any country. They just have their anonymous organization that is, they're hacking, and then they publicize confidential information. Has Surabaya and or Indonesia been central to this? And if you can share, what kinds of precautions are you taking?
Yeah. I mean, data security and just general sort of security of the information that we deal with it's a primary principle. It's a big part of what we do, and a very serious part of the way that we conduct our work too. If you see my office, you'd understand, but I work in a space that requires probably going through about 6 or 7 layers of locks and alarms and that sort of thing, just because of the importance of keeping our information safe. So, I was in Iraq, I guess I was just on my way to Iraq when WikiLeaks happened. And I know that people have a lot of opinions about that time and that episode, and, what the obligation of the US government is to share information with people. But I did see, the importance of why we treat information the way we do as that episode unfolded, because we really do go to great lengths to protect the identities of vulnerable people around the world who give us their trust and their information and share with us things that really do help keep the world safer and better. And when WikiLeaks happened, people died because that information got out, and a lot of lives were compromised just because somebody felt like that was the right thing to do. But there are real people behind, all of the information that we generate, and we have a really deep obligation to protect them. And that's why, data security and information security is so important to keeping diplomacy, intact.
Thank you. Yes, it is a difficult challenge, and the precautions you have to take. Thanks for sharing some of the insights with us. I think that concludes the question and answer session. If you could verbally share an email where some of our young adults who are deeply interested in pursuing foreign service career, or just being able to explore, could connect with you, if that's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely. I'd be happy to connect with any of you who have questions, or if there's anything that I can help with. I will just caveat that by saying that I joined this career quite a while ago, and I know that the process to enter has changed quite dramatically. So I'm probably not the best person to weigh in on the specifics of that, but more than happy to share any insights if I can be helpful. For those who use Instagram, that's actually probably the easiest way to reach me. And my handle is at Roschan, ROSHCHAN. Feel free to shoot me a note there. Or by email, which I tend to check a little less frequently, but I do check, and I'll be sure to reply. You can reach me at RNIRODY, which is rnirody, at yahoo.com.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that information, and willing to offer some guidance to our young adults who are inspired by you. This has been a wonderful evening and late night for you. So kind of you to spare your time at a busy moment in your life. You've just moved and set aside time to share your experiences with audience across the globe from in our community. And so at this point, I will hand it to Rajiv. Rajiv can guide us on to the next steps here. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kiran. Really pleasure talking with you, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Sure.
Roshni, it's been a very, very impressive evening. Your experiences, the spectrum that they cover, and the insights that you have shared from your learnings from that, I think it's a lot of food for thought and really time well spent. Thanks a lot for all that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Really, it's been great and a pleasure. And thank you so much to everybody who
Thank you.
spent the last so many hours with us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right. Yes, those
Yeah,
thanks
thank
from
you.
right, Praveen Mom and President and Kishore Mom, Vice President to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rashmi. Thank you, Kiran Mom. Thank
Thank
you.
Yeah.
So
Ma'am, thanks for, as always, your choice has been fantastic. So thanks for arranging this. Thanks for.
sure, yes. You know, we have such a good caliber of individuals who are, the biggest thing I learned when I talk with high achieving individuals is the humility. They're so disciplined in their time management. They're so busy and yet they can deliver. You know, it's just an awesome experience. I do want to thank Pramod Mavinkure, who is connected with several individuals all across the globe. Saraswat, he was key in connecting me with Roshni. So I just want to be very transparent. You know, I really appreciate him helping me connect with Roshni, and it's been a an honor and pleasure getting to connect with her and getting her involved here. So with that, can I do the vote of thanks here?
Yes,
Rajiv?
please. Yeah.
Sure. So this has been another wonderful event. Evening, afternoon, morning across the globe. And my special thanks to Roshni Nirodi, U.S. Consulate General for Surabaya, Indonesia, sharing her very diverse and interesting life and career experience with us so late in her night in Surabaya. And it's also been a pleasure, an honor, getting to know you, Roshni, and interviewing you here today. And further, I'd like to thank our KSA President, Praveen Mao, with his busy schedule, hectic schedule. It's amazing how he's so kind, compassionate, and every time supportive. Today I made an error behind the scenes, and he so politely corrected me. And that's it's amazing how kindly he speaks, no matter what. Similar experiences with Kishore Mom, who is the Vice President of KSA and one of the founders of Entod Pharmaceuticals. Always there supporting us, no matter which time zone he is in. He's all over the globe, and he's ready to be there and help us. Thank you so much, Mom. And my thanks also to Jairam Kambotkorn Mom, who is the chairman of KSA, who could not be present today due to a prior commitment. But his support is enormous. So we're very grateful to him and this show that he supports and our activities. And as always, Rajiv, you're always there supporting me from your end. I can call you anytime and, very quickly and very accurately you respond. You're always so polite. And Rajiv is the CEO of a company called Acmetex, and which has created multiple products, very successful companies. Is very busy running that. And then in his spare time, he runs this, the CSN operation, networking all of us across the globe. under the support of KSA and its leadership. I'm
Generous
also
words, thanks.
sure, thankful to the administrative people, especially Rahul Jain, who behind the scenes supports us so reliably with the video, audio, the streaming, the channeling of the questions. Every time I feel my job is simplified significantly. Thank you, Rahul, for all of your support. And for anyone and everyone else who has been involved in this show, thanks for your support from behind the scenes. And also for the audience. We had such a captive audience, even till the last minute, 2 hours, and they're asking questions so late in the evening. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Raj. Thank you.
Okay. Praveen Ma'am or Kishore Ma'am, would you all like to add something?
Maybe Kishore Ma'am would like.
It was really a great interview, and really nice to learn from Roshni that, how with so much of interest in so many things she did in her life, really encouraging for all the audience here. So I'm really thankful to you, Roshni, for sparing your time. I know it's a late night there, and still you are with us. Thank you so much for, and also you answered almost all the questions so nicely with whatever our audience they want, and with your email ID and other things. I'm sure they will definitely would like to know more about your illustrious career. So thank you, everything. Thank you, and it was really a great experience for us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
You voiced my thoughts, Kishore Ma'am, all of us. So then with this, may I do the Sabha Samapti Prarthana?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nandantu sadhaka sarve vinashyantu vidushakaha avastha shambhavi mestu prasannostu guru sada sarve bhavantu sukinaha sarve santu niramayah sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschit dukkha mapniyat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Yes.